Welcome back everyone. In this video, we are going to create a chatbot using Python with Rasa for the backend, and for the front end, we are going to use React. This chatbot will help us automate the conversation, and it is also going to make the interactions faster and smoother. So we will be building a conversational chatbot that can understand the user inputs and will respond to that user inputs and will interact with user through clean interface. So before we jump in, let me give you a quick overview of what we will be building in this video. This is what we are going to be building in this video. Over here, you can type in the message that you want the chatbot to answer. So let's suppose, for example, first of all, we are greeting it, and this will greet us back with, "Hey, how are you?" Okay. And then you can ask it about what programming languages does this chatbot know. So we will hit enter, and it is going to answer that it knows about various programming languages, including whatever the languages are. Then over here, we can ask it what is React or something. For example, you can ask Python or whatever, and this is also going to answer you back. Okay, so this is what we are building in this video. Not only this, we are also going to have a functionality where you can create a new chat or delete an existing chat. So suppose, for example, we create a new chat. You see, it gives us a new chat with the conversation 6, and if we want to delete this chat, we can do it by clicking on this trash icon. Okay, and it is going to alert us that if we really want to delete this conversation, if we click OK, that conversation will be deleted. Okay, you can delete another one also. You can check this, create new conversation. Okay, so this is how our chatbot is going to look like. You can train your chatbot model according to yourself, according to what you need. Okay, so this is for the demo. So first we will set up the backend with Rasa and then use Flask to act as a bridge between the backend and the React frontend. Then we will create frontend in React. Alright, let's start with the backend of our chatbot, and for that we are going to use Rasa, which is an open source framework for building conversational AI. Okay, so for this, first of all, you have to visit this Python website where you are going to download the Python version of 3.9, 3.8, or you can even download 3.10. Why this specific version? Because it is mentioned in the Rasa document that Python 3 only supports the following version for Rasa, that is 3.7, 8, 9 and 10. If you are a Mac user, Rasa installation on Apple Silicon with Python version, that is 3.10, is not functional in 3.4. So if you have M1 or M2, there are some limitations that you have to check it over here. And this is why we are going to use 3.9 version into this video for the Python. Okay, so in this video we are installing a specific version of Python, that is 3.9. so the command will be brew install python at 3.9. okay, so let me just show you what I am saying. So first of all, you have to run the command brew install python at 3.9. Okay, I already have it, so I'm not going to run this command. After your installation is done, you can check the version with the command python 3.9 - version, and it is going to give you the specific version that you have installed for the Python. And now over here, I'm going to navigate into my projects folder, and in that I'm going to create a new folder, Chatbot, and then navigate inside to that folder and create another folder inside it, that would be backend. Navigate to the backend folder then, and in this backend folder we are going to create a virtual environment which we will call it Rasa env. This environment will contain all the packages that we will be needing for the Rasa chatbot. So let's hit enter, and now let's open this folder into the VS Code so we know what is going on. So this is how it is going to look when we create the Rasa virtual environment into our backend directory. You are going to have this folders. And now we want to activate this virtual environment. So for this, we have a command source rasa-env bin and then activate. So let's activate this. Okay, what does it say? So it says there is no such file or directory because we have to first navigate inside to the backend folder. And then we have to run the command source rasa-env and we have to activate this. So you see over here, now we are into the virtual environment. And now inside this, we have to install the Rasa using pip. So for it, we have another command which will be pip install Rasa. And I think it might take a couple of minutes or a second. So let's wait till it's done. And once the latest version of the Rasa is done installing, we are going to add some additional dependencies into our backend project, which we are going to use later for handling the HTTP request and cross-origin resources. And now the Rasa is done installing, we will add the additional dependencies, which will be Flask, Flask course and request. Okay, so let's hit enter. And it has successfully installed the Flask, Flask course and request. Okay. So now that we have everything installed, we are going to initialize our Rasa project with the command rasa init. First, let me clear this. So yes, this is the command we are going to have, rasa init. Then hit enter. With this command, Rasa will ask us if we want to create the default directory structure and simple files. And yes, it has asked us the question that do you want to train an initial model? So let's click yes. And this might take a couple of moments, okay? So this created these following files, these following YAML files, actions folder, data folder, and test folder. So basically what is happening over here is this Rasa is creating a sample board which is going to be already configured. It is going to be a great starting point for us to build further on. So over here Rasa is automatically training a model based on the initial setup. This model will help the chatbot to understand the user inputs and generate appropriate responses. And now it has asked us the question that do you want to speak to the trained assistant on the command line? So we will click yes. Once it is done, we will have the functional chatbot backend. Okay. So over here, Rasa server is up and running. Perfect. So our Rasa backend is now ready. So now that we have the Rasa server ready, let's first test it on Postman. So for it, first we need to run our Rasa server. So make sure that you are into the virtual environment, and to run the Rasa server, we have the command rasa run --enable -API, then course and the asterisk. Okay. This will start the Rasa server and allow us to communicate with it through HTTP request. So you can see over here that the Rasa server is starting on the port 5005. So let's open the Postman. Okay, so before we open the Postman, we got an error because one Rasa server is already running. For the demo purpose, I started it. Let me just close that down and run this command again. Until that time, let's open the Postman. So here we have this message, Rasa server is up and running. So let's head over to the Postman. So in the Postman, we are going to make a post request to this localhost or to this endpoint, okay? And in the body, let me just minimize this. We are going to have this sender, which has the value of test user and a message react, okay? Or we can say hello instead of react, okay? And then let's hit send. And over here we have the 200 response with the recipient's ID and the text from the chatbot, which is saying, hey, how are you? Okay, so that means our Rasa server is up and it is running perfectly fine. So now that we have set up and tested the basic Rasa chatbot, it's time that we create the custom intents, okay? Intents are essentially the user's purpose or goal when they interact with the chatbot. So in the data folder, we are going to have this nlu.yaml file where we can create the intents, okay? So let's do this now. So in this file, we have various intent that you can see over here, right? And down below, we are going to create another 2 intents. And those 2 intents are going to be, first, we ask for programming languages. This is going to allow the user to ask our chatbot about the different programming languages it knows, okay? And then we have the ask web development intent, which is going to answer the question if users ask for web development. And this is the way that the bot can recognize common phrases that the user might say when they are asking about the programming languages, web development, or simply greeting the bot. And once we have defined our intents, we need to add appropriate response into domain.yaml file, which is present over here. This is where we define how the bot is going to respond to different user inputs. So here I have added the specific response for the question about the programming languages and the web development. So for example, if user asks what programming languages does this chatbot know, it is going to reply with this. Okay, and finally we have to make sure that the chatbot behaves correctly. For it we have to create stories. So first of all, let's save this file and also this file over here. Then open the stories.yaml file, which is present into the data folder. So into the story over here, we have to specify our intents. So these are the two intents that we created, right? So here we are creating the stories for it. So let's save this file too. So basically these stories are training example of the conversation flow, which makes sure that the chatbot behaves correctly. And this is going to help Rasa understand how to respond based on the user inputs. So now this is all done. We are going to move further ahead and create the Flask backend. For it, we are going to create a file into the root directory of the backend, and we are going to say, or we are going to name it app.py. This is going to be the Flask backend that will serve as a bridge between the Rasa and React as our front end, and it is also going to handle the user conversation and stores the chat history in MySql database. So in this app.py file, we are going to first off start by bringing in the Flask and enable CORS, which is going to allow cross-origin requests from the front end. So this is how we are enabling the CORS for all of the routes into our application. And over here, we are importing the Flask, Flask CORS request and even MySql connector, which we are yet to install. Then down over here, we are integrating MySql to store the conversation data. So in this database, we are going to have two tables, one for conversation and one for messages. We will create this in a matter of moments, so let's wait. But over here, we are just setting up our MySql database with the user, password, host and database name. And then to send the user messages to the Rasa server, we are going to define the Rasa API URL, and we are also going to create a function for it. And the function we are going to define is going to have the chat endpoint, which is this, /chat. This is the endpoint. The method is post over here. This is going to accept the user messages as JSON, and it is going to send them to the Rasa. So over here we are sending the message to the Rasa. If the message is received, we are going to print receive message from the Rasa into our console. And if there is no user message or no user ID or conversation ID from the tables into the MySql database, we are going to return the error with no message, particular user ID, conversation ID, and the status will be 400. And if the response by the Rasa is not 200, we are going to say error communicating with Rasa. But if we get the response from the Rasa, we are going to print that and respond it into the JSON format. And over here, we are also going to save the user messages and the bot responses to our MySql database. And over here, we have another helper function which is going to retrieve all of the messages between the user and the chatbot for a specific conversation. And this is going to be sorted by the timestamp. This function is first of all connecting to the MySql database using our configuration and runs a query to select the user messages, bot response, and conversation ID from the messages. And then we are sorting the result by timestamps in ascending order, so we can display the messages into the correct order starting from the first message. This sorted chat history will be returned to the front end for display, Then we are creating the another get route, which is history. It is going to retrieve the chat history based on the user ID and a specific conversation ID. If either parameter is missing, it is going to return an error message. This endpoint is fetching the chat messages associated with the conversation, which is going to help us display the past conversation between the user and the chatbot. Then we create another endpoint, which is new conversation. It is a post endpoint. This is going to generate a new conversation ID, and then we are saving this ID along with the user ID and the timestamp to the database, allowing us to retrieve it later on. Over here, we are using the timestamp to create the unique ID, but for production, this is not the perfect choice, okay? You can use UUIDs for it. Next, we have another get endpoint conversation, which will retrieve the list of conversations associated with the user ID. And this will help us populate the sidebar with the past conversation. So it is going to show you conversation 1, 2, 3, and so on if you have past conversations, okay? Then we have another endpoint, which is delete conversation endpoint. This is taking the user ID and the conversation ID and will delete the corresponding records from both of the messages and the conversation tables into our database. This is going to be essential when user want to permanently delete a conversation, and once it is done, the endpoint will confirm the deletion with the success message. And then finally, at the last, we are starting our application on all the network interfaces on the port 5001, and we are also enabling the debug mode to see the logs into the console, okay? So that is what we are going to have for this file. Okay, let's now save this file. So now that we have our Flask app configured and we have also configured the MySql for storing chat history, we need to install a Python package that is going to allow us to connect to MySql database, which is MySql connector. So for it, we have a command. So let's open the terminal. Let's stop this server for now. Let me clear this. And then to install the MySql connector, we have to run the command pip install mysql-connector-python. Let's hit enter. And it has successfully installed the MySql connector Python, okay? So now that we have the MySql connector also installed, we can proceed to write the code to interact with the database and connect it with Chatbot, basically our front end, okay? But before that, let's create the database into MySql Workbench. So over here, once you have MySql Workbench open, click on this plus icon over here. Name your connection. Here I am going to name it as Chatbot, okay? And you can see the host name and the port for it. The username is root, and whatever the password you have set up while installing MySql Workbench will be the password for you, okay? Then let's click on OK. Let's open this Chatbot by clicking on it, and here it is going to ask us for the password, and I have password over here. Then click on OK. Continue anyway, and over here we are inside the Chatbot. So over here, as I already have a database named Chatbot, I'm going to create a database named Chatbot for this. So over here we are creating the database with the command create database Chatbot, okay? Then click on this icon and you will see over here that it has created a new database named Chatbot. When you refresh this, you will have it over here, and inside this now we have to create the tables. Before that, we have to specify which database we want to use, and over here we are using Chatbot. Okay, so in this, first of all, we are going to create a table named conversation, which is going to have the ID, which will auto increment, user ID, conversation ID, and the timestamp. Okay, then we will click on this icon button, and when you refresh the schemas into the Chatbot, you are going to have one table named conversation, and just like that we will create another table named messages, which will have the ID, conversation ID, user messages, bot response, timestamp. Okay, And then let's click on this icon once again, and another table will also be created with the name messages. Okay. So once these both tables are created, now we are all set to store and retrieve the conversation data from our chatbot. The only difference is in the app.py file, when we created the database, our database name was Chatbot, but here we will name it as Chattybot. Only this is the difference. Then let's save the file. So now that we have built and tested our backend, we are going to now work on frontend. And our frontend will consist of three main components, which will be chat sidebar, chat window, and chat app. Okay, but before we move ahead, this is how you have to make your front end. You have to visit this documentation which is present on the Tailwind website and follow these steps one by one and create your front end. So over here, let me just close this, and inside over here, we are going to create another folder and name it as a client or front end, whatever you want to call it. Then open the terminal and navigate inside to the client folder and run these commands one by one. Okay, and after that your project directory will look something like this. And inside the source folder, then you have to create the components folder, which will have our three components. Create these files. Okay, and let's now start with chat sidebar. So this chat sidebar component will serve as a navigation for all the conversation in our chatbot. It is going to let the user toggle between the different chat sessions, delete conversation, and even start a new chat. So first thing first, we start in by bringing the React useState from React, and we also bring in some icons from React icons library. This is the library we are yet to install. Next, we create our functional chat sidebar, which is taking chat, select chat, delete conversation, start new conversation, and selected chat index as parameters. Inside it, we have a state variable is sidebar open, which is going to control whether the sidebar is visible on smaller screens. So basically, this is going to have like a hamburger menu for small devices. Then we have created a function to toggle the sidebar. Then we will have the return statement, inside which we will have the div, buttons, and all of the classes that we will be needing to style our sidebar component. So over here we have a button which is going to use the React icons to show the toggle between the bars and the times icon. On mobile devices, this button is going to let user open and close the sidebar. Next over here, we are looping through the chats array to display each conversation. So when a conversation is clicked, we are going to use the select chat function to highlight it, indicating that it is the active chat session. And then down over here, we are also adding a delete button next to each conversation using the /# icon. If the user confirms, it is going to trigger the delete conversation function, which will remove the selected conversation from the application. And last, at the bottom, we have a new chat button. When you click on this, it is going to trigger the start new conversation function, which will initiate a fresh conversation. So this is what we are going to have for the chat sidebar component. This is simple, but it is essential for managing multiple conversation in our chatbot. Okay, so now this is done. Let's open the chat window.jsx file, because this is what we are going to work on with right now. This is going to be the main interaction area, the chat window. This is where the user can send and receive the messages with the bot. So first thing first, we are importing React, useState, useRef, useEffect from React. Then we are creating our functional component chat window, and we are also exporting it. Inside it, we have created state variable, which is message, and we are also using useRef to handle the automatic scrolling to the latest message. And over here we also have an onSend message function passed as a prop, which will be triggered when the user submits a message. Then down over here we create the handle submit function, which is going to process the user's input and send it to the bot. Over here, we are first checking if the conversation ID is available before sending the message. If the message is not empty, it is going to trigger the onSend message with the clear input fields. Okay. Then we have another function which is scroll to bottom, which is going to make sure that the chat automatically scrolls to the most recent messages, giving user a smooth experience during a long conversation. And this use effect hook is going to help us scroll to the latest messages that the user have. Okay. Then of course we are going to have the return statement, inside which we are going to have several divs and form. We will go through this structure one by one. So first of all, over here we are checking if the length of the chat is 0. We are going to display a message which is going to say what I can help with. Okay, but if there is a chat, for each messages we are going to check if it is from the user or the bot and display them accordingly. And at the bottom we will have the input form where users can type their messages, and when they hit send, the send button will trigger the message submission or form submission, we can say. Okay, then this send button will trigger the message submission. Okay, so that is what we are going to have for the chat window. Next we will work with chat app. So now that the chat sidebar and chat window components are built, now we are going to bring them together in our main component, that is chat app. This is where all the interaction logic between the user, bot and backend happens. So first thing first, we are bringing in the React and other hooks, Axios, chat sidebar and chat window. In this component, we are going to manage multiple conversation, track user interaction, and also handle sending and receiving messages from our Rasa chatbot. Then we are going to create our chat app functional component, inside which we are going to have various state variables. So over here we are using the useState hook to manage the chat history, selected conversation index and the list of conversation. And if you noticed over here is we are using the local storage to persist the data. So if the user refreshes their page, their chat history remains intact. Okay, and then when the conversation is selected, we are going to use the use effect hook to fetch its history from our Flask API. And over here, we are going to make the API call to our endpoint, that is /history. And we are also passing the conversation ID to it and also the user ID. And then we will create the handle send message function, which is going to send the user messages to the backend when it is processed by the Rasa bot. And once we get the bot's response, we are going to update the chat history both in our state and into the local storage. But if there is no current conversation ID, we are just going to console log an error which is going to say conversation ID is missing. And over here, this endpoint is going to be at 5001/chat. So we are sending the message, user ID and the conversation ID, and our content type is JSON. Okay, and if the bot response is not 0, we are just going to send the bot response, but if there is no response, we are going to say no response. Okay, and this is where we are updating our state and also the local storage with the response, whatever response the bot is giving. During any of this we get any error, we are just going to console log it. Okay, and then we have another function that is going to start the new conversation. Okay, this start new conversation function is going to call the API which is at the endpoint /new_conversation, and this is taking the user ID. So this is first of all going to save the conversation ID to the database. Then we are going to also update the conversation state. Then we are storing the conversations into the local storage, and then we have the new chats array which is going to create an empty chat array. Then store the chats into the local storage. We are going to start with the index which is going to be conversation length -1. Okay, and then store the selected chat index into local storage. If new conversation is started, we are going to console log it with the conversation ID. If we get any error, we are just going to respond it with the error starting a new conversation followed by whatever the error will be. And then down over here, we are going to have the delete conversation function, which will help us remove the selected conversation from the backend and the frontend. So first of all, we bring in the conversation ID that we want to delete. If there is no conversation ID, for that we are going to console log an error, conversation ID is missing. And here we are making a delete method request to the endpoint / conversation, which is taking the user ID and conversation ID as the data. And this is where we are removing the conversation from the conversation data. And this is where we are removing the chat history for the deleted conversation from the chats array. And then over here, we see if the deleted conversation was the last one in the list, we also need to update the selected chat index state and local storage as well, so that the chat window doesn't show the deleted conversation. Okay, and during any of this process we have error, we are just going to console log it. Okay, and then in the return statement in this UI, we have the chat sidebar component for switching between the conversation and the chat window for displaying the active chat. Both of these components are passed by the necessary props like chat data and the onSend message function. Okay, and that is what we are going to have for the chat app.jsx file. Once it is created, we have to open the app.jsx file, and in this file, first of all, we have to import our chat app from the components folder and then bring in this chat app over here into the return statement. Perfect. So now our front-end part is also ready. Open the terminal, and over here we are yet to install this React icons library, right? So for it you have to run the command npm I react icons, so it will download it. So now it's time that we test our application. So our application or the front end is running on the localhost 5173, right? And make sure your Rasa server is also up and running. But here is one thing that we have to do is we have to train our Rasa bot again, because initially we trained it, right? So in this, your input, if you write hi, it is going to reply you with hey, how are you? But if you type in React, or if it knows about React, it is not going to answer you. It is going to answer you great, carry on. This is not the perfect answer, right? For the React, it should answer that React is a JavaScript library and so on that we declared into our stories. So this is why we have to reinitialize, or we can say we have to train our Rasa server once again. Okay, so let's stop this for now. And over here we have to run the command rasa train to train our chatbot again with the new stories and intents that we created. And once this is done, we are going to restart our Rasa server and also the Flask server. So for it, navigate to another terminal, and over here navigate to the backend directory and then activate our Rasa environment variable, virtual environment. Then we will run the command python app.py to start our Flask server, and it will start on localhost 5001. And over here the Rasa server is up and running. And then let's head over to our front end application and test this application. Okay, and this is how the chatbot is going to look initially. Okay, let me just minimize it. Over here we don't have any conversation yet, so we are going to create a new chat. When you type in over here hi, it is going to reply you with the hey, how are you? And then let's ask this bot about the programming languages it knows. So let's hit Python. Okay, so it does answers, right? And you can create another chat if you want. You can delete this chat, or you can even delete this chat if you want. Okay, and this application is working properly fine, isn't it? So you can train your bot according to your needs. Okay, you can provide any of the intents or stories that you want your bot to answer. Okay, and with this we have completed our entire project, and now you have a fully functional chatbot which is powered by Rasa and Python on the backend, even Flask and React on the front end. Okay, and if you love this video, go ahead and try to build your own chatbot, and feel free to share your projects into the comments section. So yes, I will see you in the next video. Till then, bye bye and take care.